Hello and welcome to another episode of CollectaThoughts, the show where I collect my thoughts on video games, and today we're gonna be talking about The Survey, a small indie horror game on Steam that I played by accident. I was looking for a different game and I thought it was this one, so well, here we are today reviewing a game I didn't mean to play, but I guess I played it. Definitely mostly because it was also under an hour long, and that definitely helps. If not, I would have probably just, refunded it and moved on with my life. But I didn't, and so we are here today reviewing it. And what is this game about? Well, for starters, we have to acknowledge that this is very much a very low budget game to the extent of where even the environment is the at this point, infamous Unity house. It's hard to describe as someone that never used Unity to make a game or made a game in general, but it's a house that you will definitely recognize if you've played any of those asset flip games. And exposing myself here a little bit, it's also very famous for a very specific adult game called House Party that's also on Steam. So immediately a lot of the horror is knocked down here by the fact that I immediately associate it with a sleazy adult entertainment type of game. The other thing I also immediately kind of assumed was that this would also be the complete environment of the game. And I turned out to be right. You never leave this house. Not even outside. Even the sketchy game I just mentioned does that. It does give you a backyard. This game just kind of lets you walk around inside, which adds to a very repetitive feeling gameplay loop. And what is that gameplay loop, you might be asking? Well, it's walking around and reading pieces of paper. There really isn't much going for it gameplay wise here. It has less interactivity than most walking simulators. It is really bordering on the line of reading a book, but sometimes you have to walk around and listen to some spooky noises. And to be fair, that's probably the strongest part of this game. The audio design is surprisingly good. There is a sense of, oh, there's someone else in the house type of thing, which makes sense with the story. And another smart thing that the audio design does is it often directs you where to go. Like, for example, you read a piece of paper and then you'll hear someone running upstairs. So you go upstairs and you find another piece of paper there. Again, the gameplay loop is not particularly fun, but that little piece about it is surprisingly creative and good. And to an extent, I would even say scary. But as you start seeing through the flaws in this and the limitations of the game itself, I do think that the scares for me absolutely died off. I don't want to spoil, but I feel it's impossible, so I'm just gonna say it. I felt that the moment you finally encounter the monster of the game, any tension is completely killed off. Because of how it works and how it exposes how the game is really just, reading a book. And so with that, let's talk about the story, which I'll say had potential. The story revolves around a family of 4, a sister and a brother, where the sister is a talented artist and she's making quite a lot of money for the parents, and the parents are kind of abusing that. Meanwhile, the brother is jealous. And now from what I'm gonna say next, I can almost be sure that you're gonna guess what the plot twist or even just the overall narrative is. And that is, the game takes place after the events and you're reading about them and you're playing as the brother. So yeah, it does fall into a lot of cliches in that way. But honestly, that's not even my problem with the writing. My problem with the writing is honestly how often pretentious and full of itself it can feel. It acts like this isn't the most predictable story ever, as it drops reveals and plot twists. And beyond that, the one that really annoyed me was how at the end of it, it leaves no room for interpretation or having your own opinion on things, as the voice of what I'm guessing is the creator or writer of this story shows up through a diegetic narration and basically beats you over the head with any kind of idea you could have had about this story. It is really like, and I'm gonna try to do this without spoiling, a voice in a radio goes, and now the character is paying for its crimes and is suffering. Meanwhile, in the world of the game, this is supposed to be a journalist talking who is just reporting some news. It is legitimately bordering, if not already on the side of funny bad. Which is how maybe you could enjoy this game, but I feel like for the most part it's just too slow and boring to receive in that way. And it's not like the writing is so horrible throughout that you can be just laughing at it. To me, it was really just these moments, especially towards the end, where it felt like the writers really did not want you to think for yourself. So I can't really recommend it even on that sense. Now for a more technical side of this, I already mentioned that this does look like an asset flip, and after a bit of further investigation, it does seem that most of the assets of this game are bought from the Unity store to some extent. That being said, that doesn't stop it from looking alright. It does look like a Unity game. It doesn't really have a particularly strong art direction, and it's noticeable in that way. It's also clear that this person was, influenced by certain other horror games, like a certain free game called PT, with the way some of the visuals are handled. But again, it never really manages to make it its own. It really just comes off as I saw PT and then I tried to do the same thing in Unity. That being said, I still think that this game is surprisingly competent, especially in the soundtrack department, in the way that the sound is used for the gameplay purposes, like I mentioned early on. That being said, the actual sounds themselves are probably also just stock sound effects, which is again fine. This is clearly a very small indie game with probably a very small team, if not a single person, which might be since the developer is listed as the name of a single person. And yeah, I know that great games have been done by a single person, but still, I'm gonna be a bit charitable to someone making a game all by themselves, okay? Despite that, me saying that, as I'm gonna give the score to this game, maybe this is gonna look a bit bad, but I am giving the survey a 3 out of 10. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but also I would never really recommend it to anyone. You're pretty much just reading a very simple story intertwined with some moments of walking around a spooky house and sometimes being forced to just kind of sit there and listen to spooky noises for a long time, or just kind of be lost looking for the next piece of the story, which really just makes it annoying in my opinion. That being said, I do hope that this developer keeps making games, or if they're a single person, maybe gets, working for a studio or something like that. I do think they're fairly talented in a lot of aspects. Like I said, the audio design was very interesting, and I think there's a big chance here that this person goes on to make something much better later on. At least I hope so. Recommendations wise though, the game sells for $5 and it's less than an hour long. It's not particularly the most value. It's also not particularly the worst value either, but honestly, I could not recommend. There are a lot of better indie horror games out there, and honestly, if I hadn't mistaken this for something else I actually wanted to play, I don't think I would ever even had come across it. It is a game that kind of just exists and it's been forgotten. I bet this video is gonna get no views, but that's fine. I felt the need to review it just so I could, justify myself a little bit in having spent the hour with it. Okay, this is getting stupid. Regardless of whatever you decide, I hope that you enjoyed watching. And if so, please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting. All the things you can do for free here on YouTube. Also, disliking now is fine too. And regardless of that, how much dead open space would you need to have in your walls for someone to be able to live in them? It's just kind of unrealistic, I think. Goodbye.